If you're going to do requests, it's Norbit, which people would like to hear, please. They've seen the poster and they fear the worst.
Yeah, the poster, which is Eddie Murphy dressed as a fat woman, lying on Eddie Murphy with an afro, and the tagline is, "Have you ever made a really big mistake?" Which is clearly something which could apply to Mr. Murphy himself, because the story is this, right? Eddie Murphy, who's done a lot of rubbish, I mean, he did some good stuff earlier on, he did a lot of rubbish, then performs in Dreamgirls, and everyone says, wow, God, you remember Eddie Murphy was really, really talented once, and look, here he is in Dreamgirls, he's doing this character, it's part Marvin Gaye, it's part James Brown, it's part Little Richard, he can sing, he can dance, he's talented. I know, let's nominate him for an Oscar, let's forgive him for all those crimes against cinema, let's nominate him for an Oscar. So they nominate him for an Oscar. Then along comes Norbit, in which Eddie Murphy dresses up as a really fat woman who marries Eddie Murphy as a thin bloke with an afro. And everyone presumably says, hang on a minute, we're not going to vote for that guy. I don't care how good he was in Dreamgirls, he just made Norbit. And it's like that one of the pleasures of Big Brother, for those who watched it, was watching celebrities torching their own careers. And possibly the only pleasure of Norbit is watching Eddie Murphy saying, look, I've just dragged myself out of the mire when everyone thought I was completely useless. Now they think I'm great. I know, let's just set fire to my career again. So what you get is back to the old shtick of Nutty Professor. Look, I can dress up and I can wear plastic appliances. Hey, isn't that funny? Sadly, the dress-up appears to be based on that Martin Lawrence character, Big Mama's House. And here's the joke. Fat people are really funny. You know why? Because they're fat, and we're not. And they are. Isn't that funny? And that is the whole gag. It's literally the entire gag of the movie. Eddie Murphy is thin, wears a fat suit, and marries himself. Here is a clip from early on in the movie that does not feature Eddie Murphy. It features the young kid playing the young Norbit meeting for the first time the fat girl. And this is indicative of the tone of the film. Here's the clip.
What'd you do that for? Because we felt like it. What are you going to do about it?
Leave him alone.
Says who? Who are you?
Respucia, what's your name?
Norbit.
Norbit? That's a stupid name.
Why'd you beat those boys up?
To protect you. You got a girlfriend, Nesbit?
Norbit. No.
Well, you do now. Get up and hold my hand.
Okay.
How you doing?
That's a great script.
That is the bit of the movie that basically is like Oscar Wilde in comparison with the rest of the film in which Eddie Murphy himself turns up. So they get married, she gets fatter, the bed breaks, she stays fat, he stays wearing the silly haircut, he's a dork, she's the fat woman. That is the whole film. Now, the bizarre thing is that the person who plays the love interest to Eddie Murphy in this, the love interest other than Rasputia, is Tandy Newton, who is ridiculously thin. I mean, like, really ridiculously thin. Does anyone make thin jokes? Does anyone say, oh, look at that? Anyone other than Rasputia? No. Eddie Murphy also plays an Oriental character who makes some kind of sly asides about racism. But does anyone ever make any sly asides about sizeism? Does anyone ever suggest that making this grotesque gag for the space of 90 minutes is not only not funny and not clever, but actually not very nice? I mean, actually not very forward-thinking, actually not the kind of thing that a decent, upstanding person who just got nominated for an Oscar and clearly has some talent which he chooses to squander on this sort of horrible piffle should be doing. I mean, you really sit there wondering at the agency meeting in which somebody said, you know, Eddie, I think this is a really good idea for your career, because right now everyone suddenly thinks you've made it back. Everyone really quite likes you. Everyone really remembers how talented you are. Let's do something so vulgar, so stupid, so dumb, so just repugnant that everyone will hate you again, all over again. I mean, the really strange thing about Norbit is that not only does it have no slapstick comedy laughs in it whatsoever, I mean, there is just nothing funny about it. But you remember that film Feeder, okay? Feeder was a really sleazy, vile, morally vacuous, horrible film about a serial killer who feeds his victims to death. And that was funnier than Norbit. And there were more moments in that film that I actually thought, that's chortle-worthy than watching Eddie Murphy walking around in the fat suit. I mean, there's something so depressing about it. There's something that you put your head in your hands and think, I never really liked Eddie Murphy that much, but I was so up on, Dreamgirls, wow, maybe I got it all wrong. Maybe he really is a smart guy. No. It's like Dreamgirls is the aberration. This is the monster inside. Here it is. This is what he wants to do. He and Martin Lawrence are, on this. And it's funny, there is a comparison with Little Man in that they are both based on the same basic premise, which is that obnoxious, cynical, nasty humor made by fairly good-looking, wealthy people about people other than themselves is funny. I'm sorry. It's not acceptable. It's not on. It has to stop. And, I think maybe a 3-month probationary sentence with some flogging just to knock this out of his system.
I feel in the need for some Jane Austen, but before we get there, you should be reminded that next Friday is Gold Cup Day. At the Cheltenham Festival. So for 1 week only, a rather extraordinary thing, where the good doctor and myself will be joining Matthew Bannister to bring in a few film reviews. So the alarm set, please, for 11:30 next Friday. And then after that, podcasters and consumers of that won't be bothered because it'll turn up in the normal place. Anyway, having said that, give us some Jane Austen, Mark.
Well, shall I try and belt through 3 movies in about 3 minutes?
As long as it's got some Jane Austen in it.
Okay, fine. So the Jane Austen thing. So Becoming Jane, right? Anne Hathaway is Jane Austen. No, really. So there was this big fuss that when Anne Hathaway was cast, all these Austen fans said, you can't do that. Why not Kate Winslet? Or why not Keira Knightley? Or blah-de-blah-de-blah. Well, basically, we've exhausted all the Austen novels in Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility and Emma, and then you've had Clueless, which is based on an Austen novel. So now somebody's come up with the idea that having done the novels, although I don't think anyone's done Northanger Abbey, having done the novels, let's make a film about Jane Austen's life that says that Jane Austen's life is actually more exciting than the novels because, in fact, all that stuff is drawn from her own personal anguish. So the story has Jane Austen, in real life, her family need money. They want her to marry this guy who's boring but rich. She's actually got the hots for Tom McAvoy, who's kind of roguish, but he appreciates her artistic side, and he's the man she should marry. But in the way of these things, the course of true love doesn't run smooth. Now, actually, the least of the movie's problems is Anne Hathaway. She's perfectly fine. Her English accent is a little touch and go every now and then, but it's perfectly fine. And I like Anne Hathaway. After the horror of that film she made, Havoc, in which she suddenly started doing this kind of adult role, it was really wrong. I don't want to see that. I like Anne Hathaway doing nice roles, and she's very good at doing nice. And she does Jane Austen very nice. And James McAvoy is kind of charismatic, as much as it's possible for anyone to be charismatic within the confines of a film which is so deadly dull. I can't believe for 1 minute that these true life things inspired Jane Austen's novels, because otherwise the novels would be really boring. People just don't draw inspiration from real life this dull, because the fact is real life isn't this dull. It's sort of Laura Ashley school of filmmaking, it's heritage filming. Apparently, to research the role, Anne Hathaway went and lived in an English village and drank tea and
40
made
seconds,
toast.
2 movies.
Okay, fine. So the 2 movies coming Gone, which is yet another movie about people go out to the Australian outback and really, really bad stuff happens. And actually, I thought it was pretty good. It's not Wolf Creek, but it's pretty good. And then, Outlaw, which is the new movie by Nick Love, who did The Football Factory and The Business. Back in the 1970s, it was respectable to make revenge thrillers. Then Shane Meadows reinvented the genre. Now Nick Love brings it back. A bunch of guys, they want to, revenge against the criminal world, which is not being looked after by the law enforcement agencies. It's a really dumb, stupid, macho, thick-headed film. I can't understand why people like Sean Bean are in it.
Any centre partings?
Actually, I think Sean Bean may flirt with the centre parting briefly.
There you go. Movie of the week. Oh, don't say it's the David Lynch film.
Of course it's the David Lynch film. No, I'm going to say Norbit. Yeah, Inland Empire. Okay. Go and see